I'm Vanessa Francis, and I will be guiding you through the CSEC English language this week. We are going to be looking at CSEC English SBA Part 2. So today we are going to be looking at Reflection 3, the oral presentation, the written report, and we're going to do a little recap first. So here are our objectives for today. So you're going to review the previous lesson. You're going to describe the processes associated with Reflection 3. You're going to explain the requirements of the oral presentation as well as the written report. So last week we looked at the plan of investigation, we looked at the Reflection 1, and we looked at Reflection 2. So if you remember, the plan of investigation, it's basically the introduction. So you don't have a separate introduction. The plan of investigation is your introduction. And there are certain key elements that you have to ensure that you include. For the Reflection 1, you're looking at each of your 3 artifacts. For each artifact, you're going to say how it impacted your thinking on the topic that you're doing. And in order to do that, you're going to look at whether it added to your thoughts, whether it reinforced your thoughts, or if it completely changed your viewpoint on the topic. For Reflection 2, you're looking at the 3 pieces again, but for a different reason. This time you're looking at it in order to say how language was used in each one. All right, so now that we have that clear, we can move ahead. Reflection 3. So what is it? It's basically an explanation of the process that you used in the SBA and how it has made you a better person. So you're going to explain to your examiner how it is that you have changed for the better between the start of the SBA and the present moment. What should you do? Of course, you need to discuss the skills and attributes that you have developed, and you have to say how they were developed. You can't just say, well, I gained this skill or that skill and just leave it there. No, we need to explain how it went. So here are some examples of skills that you may talk about. So you can talk about your interpersonal relations. So perhaps you started out being very shy, very antisocial perhaps, but throughout the course of doing the SBA, having to interact with your group mates, having to interact with your classmates perhaps, then your interpersonal skills would have been developed. Think about time management. We mentioned that before. So the whole idea of having to meet deadlines, of having to submit your pieces on time. Think about your confidence. Again, perhaps you were very shy and perhaps you were not really the type of person to speak up. However, throughout the course of having to do your oral presentation, of having to make mini presentations leading up to that, your confidence was built. Think about your expression, both written and oral. Remember, you have to write certain sections, but then you also have to communicate through speech as well. So you have to talk. You have to talk a lot. If you don't like to talk, you will learn how. Think about your critical thinking skills. So when you were reading the different articles or different pieces, when you were watching different items, when you were listening to different things, you had to think about them. You had to process them. You had to think about, how can I use this? Can I use this? Should I use this? That sort of thing. When you were writing the different sections, you had to think about what you were doing. Were you on the right track? Or were you going off on a tangent? So these are the critical thinking skills activities that would be coming about. Think about work ethic. Work ethic meaning how seriously you had to approach this SBA. So perhaps you were the last minute person, perhaps you were the slacker, but because you had to consistently work at this, your work ethic possibly improved. So maybe you had to just get serious and say, listen, this is my grade is important, let's work at it. And of course, what new knowledge have you gained? So throughout the course of reading different things, watching different things, listening to different things, some knowledge must have come into play at some point in time. So you can speak about that. What new things did you learn? And how are they going to help you in the future? Now, it is advised that you write this reflection last. So it is the last thing that you write. And it should be obvious why, because you have to talk about everything that has impacted on you. So it's good to leave it for the very last piece that you write, and then you put it with the other reflections. Keep in mind, even though we have been talking about the reflections separately, what will happen is you have one section labeled reflection, and all three of them run concurrently. So you type the first one, drop it in. The second one, you just add that to it. The third one, you add that to it. So you're not going to label them reflection 1, 2, 3. You're just going to label reflections, and you have them running one behind the other. So now for the written report. This is a 250 to 300 word summation of the procedures and processes and the outcomes of conducting the research. You have been doing a research, you have been learning how to do a research. So this is the point at which you're going to say how you have more or less understood the processes involved. So the first step, among the group members, you're going to decide on 2 research questions. So everybody would have had their own personal research questions going into their own SBA. So you can come together and decide which 2 to use from among all of your SBA questions. Remember, it's 4 or 5 of you in the group, so that should be quite a number of questions to choose from. Then, you're going to select from among your artifacts which artifacts to analyze. So again, you each would have had your 3 artifacts. So you're going to come together, you're going to look at them, and then based on the questions that you chose, you're going to see which artifacts, which 3, fit those questions, answer those questions. Again, just as with your personal SBA, one of the artifacts chosen has to be paper-based. So what you can do, everybody presents their paper-based artifact, you pick one from among them, and then you just do a random shuffling of the rest. You read them, you analyze them, you watch, whatever the case may be, and decide on which 2 additional ones you want to include. Third step, you have chosen artifacts, so of course you have to justify why you chose the artifacts. So give meaningful explanations of why you chose each piece. You're analyzing the artifacts now in the next step. So you're going to briefly describe what strategy you use to analyze it. One strategy is soapstones. You can look that up. So you look at things like the author, you look at the tone, you look at the context, and so on. Now, for each of your research questions, what you need to do is show the relationship to the artifact, of course, and you're going to show the relationship to the outcome, because after you have read or watched whatever it was, you had a conclusion that you drew. So you're going to relate the artifact to the question that you chose, and then the artifact and the question to the subsequent outcome. Next, you're really saying how and to what extent the artifacts answer the question. So, to recap for this particular section, so you're going to select 2 research questions. Remember, everybody comes together, you contribute your questions, pick 2 out of those. Then you're going to select 3 artifacts to analyze. Remember now, one has to be paper-based. Then you're going to justify why that particular artifact, those particular artifacts were selected. So you have to say why you chose these 2. Then you're going to analyze each artifact in relation to both the research question and, of course, the outcome of the research. So to what extent did it answer the research question? Now for the oral presentation. Now, this section is the one that many students dread. So if you're not the outgoing type, if you're not the performance type, then this one will seem a little daunting. However, have no fear. Practice is here. So this section now is a personal response of 3 to 5 minutes on a selected issue, topic, theme, or event based on the information that you gathered in the research. So remember, prior to this, you weren't really delving into the information that you got. What you were doing was just talking about the process of collecting it. You were talking about how it impacted on you. You talked about how language was used. For this section, you're going to actually share the information now. So what should you do? First thing you need to do is have a little introduction. So before you actually start, you have your introduction, which is a brief overview of the presentation. And you're going to say what genre you chose. You're going to say the sources that you used. And you're going to comment on the kind of language that you're using in the presentation. So the genre that you choose can be drama. So if you're a theater arts student, that's right up your alley. If you're a literature student, right up your alley. You can do a poem. You can do prose. So you can write a story, if anything. You can choose to do a role play. You can just write a speech. You can write an argument, or you can do an expository piece. Now, this, of course, would depend on several factors. Your personality, which one suits your personality best. If you're very gregarious, then of course, go big, go home. If you're a little reticent or a little shy, then you pick something that you're very comfortable with, because at the end of the day, you don't want to put yourself at a disadvantage, because you would have done all this work leading up to the oral presentation. You don't want to let the oral presentation be the cause of a low grade. So try and be comfortable with whatever you choose. So if you're a poet, then you can always go to town, write a poem about your situation, your issue, your topic, your theme, your event. If you like writing stories, then see how you can write a story that brings out everything that you need. If you're just an orator, then of course, write a speech. And if you like to argue, as many of you do, then of course, write an argument. And exposition, as we had mentioned before, you are really just looking at the whole idea of giving a list of details. So you're really not going to be so creative in this sense, but if that is what you're comfortable with, nothing wrong with that. So at the end of the day, what you really need to make sure you do, stay true to yourself, and ensure that whatever genre you choose, it is something that you are comfortable with, that you are capable of pulling off, and that you have had enough time to practice with as well. So if you want to challenge yourself and push the boundaries, then try and make sure that you put in enough practice, all right? You were looking at the fact that you're supposed to share your information on the issue, topic, theme, or event that you have selected. So at this point, you're going to put it together in a creative manner so that you can share the information, edify your listeners, your audience. Remember, you have to keep your audience in mind. So you don't want to have a presentation that is too drawn out. You have 3 to 5 minutes. For some, that sounds like a lot of time. For some, that sounds like a little bit of time. But trust me, if you have a really excellent presentation put together, then of course, you are fine. Now, remember, it is an English SBA, therefore you're expected to use predominantly standard English. Now, yes, you're allowed to use a little bit of Creole, a little spice, a little flavor, a little something, something. However, the bulk of what you have to say should be delivered in the standard English. Now, you are going to submit a brief plan of this presentation in the actual portfolio. So keep in mind, the portfolio doesn't include the whole presentation. So if you wrote a poem, you're not going to include the poem in there. You're going to put in a plan, which we will look at shortly. So here is an example of the plan. Now notice you have the topic there. In this case, it's My Hair Journey. And the genre is poetry. So this person would have written a poem. And then there are the sources that were used. These are the same 3 artifacts that you would have mentioned in your plan of investigation. The same 3 artifacts you would have talked about in your reflections 1 and 2. Now, the language used, so this person has decided to describe what was done in the poem. So rhyme and rhythm were used, humor as well to make the message more acceptable. There was repetition, there's intonation, there's gesticulation, of course, because it's a presentation, so you want to put a few gestures in there that are appropriate. And these are used to make the message more memorable. Then, of course, the main idea is that hair is acceptable in any texture. And then the aids that were used, different types of weave. So you are allowed to use various things like props. So you can, based on what your topic is, whatever is appropriate, you can dress up. So you don't necessarily have to wear your uniform. Clear it with the teacher first, please. So you can dress up, you can have a costume, you can have different props, you can have visual aids. So anything that will help your presentation along, help your presentation to have a more visual and oral impact. So these are the things to remember for the oral presentation. So give a brief overview. Remember that would serve as an introduction. So you are going to say, use a genre that you are comfortable with, one that you have had practice with, and one that is suitable to the actual presentation as well. You're relating the information you gathered. So this is where you talk about your issue or topic or theme or event at length. You are to use predominantly standard English. Yes, a little Creole can be used. However, it is in an English SBA, so you want to use predominantly standard English. And the important thing to note, you're submitting the plan of the presentation in your portfolio, not the entire presentation. Keep that in mind, please. So, we're going to look at your rubrics now. Now, here we are looking at the plan of the investigation. So please just pay attention to the highest bracket, which is to the far corner there. You do not need to know what gives you 0 or 1. You want to look at what gives you 3 for the maximum where 3 counts. You want to look at what gives you 2 where 2 is the maximum. So under the reasons for choosing the topic and the selection of the title, of course, for the full marks, you need to have an original and insightful reason. And of course, you gave the title. So you must say what it was that you were writing about. Then under the expected benefits to you as a student, for the maximum marks, you need to clearly state the benefits, and you need to make sure that your benefits are sound and that they're attainable. Now, the next section is split in 2. So the overall heading is that it is the proposal for collection and use of the material. So for the full 2 marks, you need to know that the material should be collected. You stated this. You gave the type, you gave the nature. Remember, we discussed that when we were looking at this section. And you give a variety of sources. Keep that in mind. A variety of sources, not just 1 or 2. For the next part, where the next 2 marks comes in, you showed how the use of English skills are going to be utilized. They're clearly outlined, and you give a clear indication of how they will be used. All right, your next rubric, of course, is for the reflection. Now, the reflection, even though it's 3 different parts, it's marked out of 5. So to get the full 5 marks, you have to complete more or less the ultimum for all 3 reflections. So if you look at the very top tier there, notice it says you produce an excellent reflection comprising of 3 entries. Remember, reflection 1, 2, and 3. So You would have had to discuss how the 3 pieces of material have affected your thinking about the issue. That would be reflection 1. You would have had to examine the use of language in 3 pieces. That's reflection 2. And you would have had to discuss the process and its effect. So that would be reflection 3. Very good. Now for the written report rubric. This one is a little more challenging and technical. So you're marked for content, and to get the full marks for content, you would have had to show the context from which the stimuli is chosen is explicitly given. So you would have had to basically state which artifacts you used and where you got them. So the things like your title, the author, if there's an author, singer, if it's a song, that sort of thing. There is clear evidence of the procedure used in selecting the 3 stimuli. So you would have explained how it is you decided on those 3 artifacts. It shouldn't come off as if you just put them in a bucket and did a raffle and pick out 3. Now, the issues raised in the stimuli are clearly defined and fully explored. So you would have had to talk about how these artifacts relate. Remember we said you're going to talk about how they relate to the question that you chose and how they relate to the outcome that you had. Then you're going to talk about the relevant tasks, so the processes and the procedures which would have been performed by the group, and you're going to talk about how you went about reporting it and that sort of thing. It's a report, so you're basically just outlining what you did and how it was done. The next thing you're marked for, evidence of investigation. So for this, it's marked out of 3. So for the total of 3, you would need to give an excellent response to the tasks. These are they. So the analysis focuses on key issues. So when you are analyzing each piece, you did not stray, you did not have anything going off on a tangent, you stayed on point. The findings of discussions and research of the relevant stimulus are clearly stated. So you give a conclusion. You say, based on this, we conclude that. All the sources are acknowledged and documented. So if you chose an article, if you chose a song, if you chose a video, we know exactly where it came from because you stated where it came from. And any comments on the stimuli, apart from your original comments, are appropriately acknowledged and documented. So if you, for instance, cite one of the sources or more than one, you need to make sure that you clearly state that such and such said in such and such. Don't let it come off like it's your words when it wasn't your words. Remember, plagiarism is strongly frowned upon. Plagiarism will get you that same little letter we talked about last week. Don't want it. The next thing you're marked for in the written report is language use and vocabulary. Yes, it's an English SBA. Of course, you're going to be marked for language use and vocabulary. So for the maximum score of 3, you would have to show excellent use of standard English and, of course, appropriate tone and register. And your vocabulary would show excellent knowledge of the interaction with the issues and context. So the way you talked about your artifacts and your research question and the outcomes shows a level of maturity, shows a level of proficiency in the language. Now, these rubrics are for the sections that you do not submit in the portfolio. So you are marked for your oral presentation, of course. So going into it, these are the things you need to ensure you do. So you're marked for fluency of delivery. For the maximum 3, it needs to be intelligible, as in it must be able to hear you. It must be clear. It must be smooth. It must be well-paced. So try not to talk too fast so that your words are running into each other and you can't be understood. Try not to talk too slow that people end up falling asleep. The next thing you're marked for is the structure, comprehensibility, and the development of the topic. For the maximum 4 marks this time, it must be clear in organization and ideas. So when you're putting the different things together in your story, in your poem, in your speech, whatever it is, everything must come together clearly in a structured and organized manner. You must have sustained treatment of the topic or theme or issue. So you should not end up going off on a tangent. Stay on point. If you're talking about your hair journey, if you're talking about love, if you're talking about technology, remain on that track. Now, your style is also supposed to be very effective and impactful. So if you choose to do a poem, then naturally there are certain things that should come out of you. It should be poetic. It should flow. If you're going to be dramatic, then of course, like I said, go big or go home. If you're just going to do a speech, even if you're going to do a simple speech, please, again, don't just stand there and talk like this and then everybody is like, what is he or she doing up there? No, you don't want it to be robotic. So you want to at least infuse some amount of style into it, your own personal style. And if you don't have personal style, you have time. Language use and vocabulary. Again, it is an English SBA, so yes, we're going to mark it for language. So, accurate use of grammar. This is outside of the Creole parts that you might slip in there for a little spice. And remember, don't put in too much spice. Too much spice get heartburn. So, accurate use of grammar, effective use of grammar and vocabulary, of course. You want to show that, yes, you know a few big words, but please, I caution you. Yes, you want to use some big words, but 1, please make sure you know what the word means. 2, please make sure you use the word correctly because you don't want to embarrass yourself up there. Your teacher marking you for all of that. And you should show a high degree of fluency and, of course, a rich vocabulary. So, remember now, again, can't stress this too much. Only the plan for the oral presentation goes into the portfolio. You don't write out the poem or the story or the speech and include it. You only submit the plan that we looked at earlier. Please remember that. I beg you, don't stress out your teacher. So the individual participation measure. Remember, I mentioned this last week that you're graded how you work together as a group. Basically, this will be an interview that your teacher will do with you twice. And notice the things that you'll be asked. So get ready to show how these things coming out. So you'll be asked if you knew about what you were supposed to do, and if you knew that you were supposed to work with a team. Yes, you do, because I told you so. Are you able to focus on what is taking place in your group? Please say yes, and please mean it. How do you feel about the group? And things like you feel confident with the group and that sort of thing. No, I know, up to since week, not everybody loves working in a group. However, part of your assessment is how well you work within a group. So even if you are a lone wolf, power to you. Please remember, even wolves need a pack sometimes. So work together with your group mates. Next question she'll ask, or he will ask, did you know how to manage how you behave in the group? You should be able to say yes with confidence. And did you manage your tasks on time and thoroughly? This is where that little time management thing comes in. So you should be able to say yes to this as well. Remember, this will happen twice. And your teacher should know you well enough, so don't tell her no lie, don't tell him no lie. They will know you're lying. Now, the next group component that you're marked on is the quality of work within groups. This part is the one I told you, where is the one mark for everybody. So you need to ensure that you get everybody on board. Now, you're marked for communication. For the full 2 marks, all the members have seen, read, and discussed the plan of work. So everybody in the group knows what it is that's going on in the group. Everybody in the group is aware of what the members are doing, who has what responsibility, that sort of thing. You're marked for collaboration. Members seek out and are aware of what all members of the group are doing. So remember, that's 4 marks right there just for knowing what everybody in your group doing and for letting everybody in your group know what you're doing. Please don't throw them away. They're very important. So for the maximum 3 marks for reflection, the group members engage in reflection on work at the end of all the activities or sessions. Basically what it's saying, when you have a little group meeting, all of you decide, you come together for one particular purpose. At the end of it, you must have come to some kind of conclusion, some kind of understanding. And then for interaction, it's a group. You're going to interact. So the members respect and appreciate each other and show empathy to all members. So one of your group members might not be feeling so well one day. You're not going to stress them out and say, you need to hurry up and done. No, you're going to understand that that person is feeling unwell, so you need to work around it. Somebody might have a sick relative. We all been affected by this COVID virus here. Somebody might have lost someone close to them. Somebody might be sick. So you need to remember these things and be empathetic towards your group mates. So here are the definitions for the different sections that were talked about. So there we go. Communication, process by which information is constructed and transmitted from person to person. Collaboration, social conditions of learning, developing affective skills, and continuing solving problems relating to acquiring language skills and so on. So collaboration, working together, helping each other. Reflection, of course, you're going over whatever it is that you've done, and you're looking at how you think about it, how you feel about it, that sort of thing. And then for interaction, again, you're in a group, so the way you talk to each other, the way you relate to each other. And in case you need to see these rubrics for yourself, they're all available at CSEC.org. So once you log on there, everything will be there for you. And here are some useful sites that you can visit too. Of course, CSEC.org, that is your examining body, so you need to go there. All Purdue for help with how to do your sourcing information, your in-text citation, how to write up your different things. Padlet that I mentioned last week for you to collaborate, because you need to show evidence of collaboration. So that's a good way to show your teacher that yes, you're collaborating. Google Docs as well to show evidence of you collaborating. And of course, TVJ social media platforms. So now that we've gone through basically all the elements, let's see how well that you understand. So I'm going to show you some faulty samples, and I need you to tell me, based on which sample you see, what you think is missing, what you think needs to go in, if anything that needs to come out. Tell me. So here's a faulty plan of investigation. Take a few seconds to read it, and then tell me what you think is missing. So we have someone, they say they selected the theme of love in the tropics, and it relates to the group's topic. And that's the group's topic, Caribbean lifestyle. They say what they expect to happen, what they intend to use, a song, a magazine article, a TV program. And they say that they expect to develop reading, writing, and speaking as their English skills. So let's have a look-see. Do you realize what is missing? You should. Here we go. So first of all, the reason for choosing the topic lacks insightfulness. So your author just said, I chose it because the group's topic is this, so I chose that. Even if that was really the case, don't say it. Please don't. Remember, you're supposed to give an insightful reason. So something that is more personal than that, which is why I've been emphasizing, pick something personal to you. No explanation was given of how the expected benefits to improve the research skills and vocabulary would be attained. So the writer said, yes, they're going to improve research skills and vocab, but didn't say how. Next set of faults. No extensive list of potential data sources given. All this person did was write the 3 sources that would be used. And remember, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to show that you did a lot of things. And then no explanation of how English skills would be developed or utilized. All right. So There's a faulty reflection 1. Read that quick. What are the problems with this faulty reflection 1? Here they are. So no title, author, presenter, or source was stated. Extensive summation was given. You're not supposed to summarize. Remember, we said just 1 or 2 sentences. That's all you need. Minimal focus on how the piece influenced or impacted the thinking about the selected topic. So hardly anything was said. And remember, that is actually the whole aim of reflection 1. That is the focus of it. And here's a faulty reflection 2 now. All right, so what's wrong with this one? The type of discourse is not identified. And because it wasn't identified, the associated features couldn't be discussed. The language techniques they weren't specified. And because they weren't specified, no insightful comments could be given. All right, faulty reflection 3 now. All right. So, of course, the skills and attributes to be developed were not clearly identified. There was no discussion of how they were going to be developed. So you couldn't get the full marks. And remember, all 3 of those put together give you 5 marks. So where you fall in 1, you're going to fall in all. So you have to try and ensure that each reflection stands up to muster, stands up to scrutiny, and that you are able to maximize the marks. Nobody should be coming out of CSEC with 2 little marks. You need to come out with, All right? So that's it for CSEC English language.